"Mom, something's wrong with Max. He won't eat. He won't even look at his food." Jessica's voice was filled with panic as she knelt beside her German shepherd, Max. His deep brown eyes, once full of life and excitement, seemed dull as he lay curled up in the corner of the living room. Normally, Max would rush to his food bowl the moment he heard the rattle of kibble, but today, he didn't even lift his head. Jessica's mother, Carol, hurried into the room, drying her hands on a kitchen towel. She bent down and ran her fingers through Max's thick fur. "Has he been acting like this all day?" Jessica nodded. "Yeah, I even tried giving him his favorite treat, and he just sniffed it and turned away." A deep frown settled on Carol's face. "We need to get him to the vet. Right now." They didn't waste a second. Jessica grabbed Max's leash while Carol called ahead to Dr. Harris, their family vet, explaining the urgency of the situation. The drive to the clinic felt longer than ever. Max usually loved car rides, sticking his head out of the window, barking at passing cars, but today he lay quietly in the back seat, his body barely moving. Dr. Harris met them at the door, his expression calm yet serious. He gestured for them to bring Max into the exam room, where his assistant, Lauren, was already preparing the equipment. "Let's check him out," Dr. Harris said, running his hands over Max's body, feeling his abdomen and checking his gums. Max barely reacted. "His belly is a bit tight," the vet noted, "and his energy is really low. When did you first notice he wasn't eating?" Jessica swallowed hard. "This morning. But last night he seemed fine, a little tired maybe, but he played with his ball and ate all his food." Dr. Harris nodded. "That's helpful. We're going to do an X-ray to see if anything unusual is going on inside. Sometimes when dogs refuse food, it can mean they swallowed something they shouldn't have." Jessica exchanged a worried glance with her mother. "You think he ate something dangerous?" "We'll know soon." Max was carefully lifted onto the X-ray table. Jessica stood by, watching nervously as the machine hummed. Her heart pounded as she waited for Dr. Harris to analyze the images. When he finally turned back to them, his face was unreadable. He motioned for them to come closer to the screen. "What is it?" Carol asked, gripping Jessica's arm. Dr. Harris exhaled slowly. "There's definitely something here. A foreign object. See this shape? It doesn't belong in his digestive tract." Jessica's breath hitched. What is it?" Dr. Harris pointed at the screen. "It's not clear yet. But whatever it is, it's large enough to be causing a blockage. That's why he isn't eating. If we don't act fast, this could become serious." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. "Can you help him?" Dr. Harris gave her a reassuring nod. "We're going to do everything we can. He needs surgery to remove it." The words hit hard, but there was no time for hesitation. Carol placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Let's do whatever it takes." Max was prepped for emergency surgery. Jessica stayed by his side until the last possible moment, stroking his fur and whispering, "You're going to be okay, buddy. You're the strongest dog I know." As the doors swung shut and the surgical team took over, Jessica sat down in the waiting area, her heart racing. She'd had Max since he was a puppy, and he had been there for her through everything. Her parents' divorce, the move to a new town, even her struggles in school. She couldn't imagine life without him. Carol sat beside her, holding her hand. "Max is a fighter. He's in the best hands." Jessica nodded, but the fear didn't leave her. Minutes stretched into an hour, then longer. Finally, Dr. Harris emerged, removing his gloves. His expression was serious, but there was something else there, something that made Jessica's stomach tighten. "It was a lot more surprising than I expected," he said. "You're going to want to see this." Jessica and Carol followed him into the back, their hearts pounding. Dr. Harris pulled out a small tray covered with a cloth. Slowly, he lifted it, revealing the object that had been inside Max. Jessica gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "No way!" Carol's eyes widened. "That's..." Dr. Harris nodded. "A stuffed toy. More specifically, a very small, well-loved one." "Does this look familiar?" Jessica felt a lump in her throat. She did recognize it. It was the tiny plush bear she had when she was little, the one she had lost years ago. "How did he..." she whispered, staring at the worn-out fabric. It had been missing for so long. Dr. Harris gave a gentle smile. "Some dogs have a way of holding on to things. Maybe he found it somewhere and decided to keep it close." Tears filled Jessica's eyes. Max had somehow swallowed the little bear she had loved as a child. It had been inside him this whole time. A piece of her past. A memory she thought was lost. Carol pulled Jessica into a hug. "He held on to it because it was yours," she whispered. "Just like he's always held on to you." Jessica nodded, brushing away a tear. "He's the best dog in the world." Dr. Harris smiled. "And he's going to be just fine. He's already waking up from the anesthesia. He'll need some time to rest, but he's strong." Jessica rushed to Max's side, kneeling by his recovery bed. His ears twitched slightly, and when he opened his eyes, she could swear he managed a small wag of his tail. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, running a hand over his fur. "I found your secret." Max let out a soft sigh, his eyes filled with trust. He had always been there for her. And now, she would be there for him. The love between them was unbreakable. And this was only the beginning of their journey back to happiness. Max's recovery was slow but steady. He spent his first night at the vet under close observation, and Jessica barely slept, checking her phone every few minutes in case Dr. Harris called. When morning came, she and Carol drove to the clinic as soon as visiting hours started. Jessica's heart pounded as she stepped into the exam room where Max was resting. He lay on a soft bed, an IV still attached to his leg, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. His ears perked slightly, and his tail gave the faintest thump against the cushion. "Hey, buddy," Jessica whispered, kneeling beside him and carefully stroking his fur. "You scared me so bad. You know that?" Max let out a low, content sigh, and for the first time since the whole ordeal started, Jessica felt herself relax just a little. Dr. Harris entered the room with a warm smile. "He's doing really well," the vet said. "He's still weak, but his vitals are strong, and his appetite should return in the next day or two. We'll remove the IV later today." Carol exhaled in relief. "So he'll be okay?" Dr. Harris nodded. "Yes. He'll need soft food for a little while, and short walks instead of his usual runs, but he's out of the woods. You'll need to monitor him closely for the next few days. Make sure he doesn't lick at his stitches or strain himself. Other than that, he's on the mend." Jessica felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time they were from sheer relief. "Thank you," she said sincerely. Dr. Harris patted her shoulder. "You brought him in just in time." Later that afternoon, Max was cleared to go home. Carol helped Jessica lift him gently into the back seat, where he settled onto a pile of blankets. The ride home was much quieter than usual. Jessica kept glancing back, checking on him. He was tired but alert, watching the passing scenery with calm eyes. When they arrived, Jessica helped him inside, guiding him to his favorite spot by the couch. She sat down next to him, running her fingers gently over his back. You really freaked me out, she murmured. I don't know what I would have done if... She stopped herself. Well, you're here. That's all that matters. Max let out a soft huff, resting his head against her leg. He was still weak, but he was there. That was enough. The next few days revolved entirely around Max's recovery. Jessica followed the vet's instructions to the letter. She mixed his medicine into wet food, sat beside him as he ate, and carried him outside when he needed to go. One evening, as she was cleaning up his food bowl, she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find a familiar face. Noah, their neighbor from down the street. He was holding a small basket in his hands, his brown hair slightly tousled from the wind. I heard about Max, he said. Figured I'd stop by. Jessica stepped aside to let him in. That's really nice of you. Noah set the basket on the kitchen counter and crouched beside Max, giving him a gentle scratch behind the ears. How's he doing? Better, Jessica said. Tired, but better. Noah nodded. Good. I brought him some homemade treats. My mom made them for our dog when he had surgery, soft enough for a recovering pup. Jessica smiled for the first time in days. That's really thoughtful. Noah gave a small shrug. Max is tough. He'll be back to chasing squirrels in no time. Jessica glanced down at Max, who was watching them with sleepy eyes. Yeah, she said softly. I hope so. After Noah left, Jessica sat down next to Max and unwrapped one of the treats. It smelled like peanut butter and oats. You up for a little snack? She asked, holding it in front of his nose. Max sniffed at it before giving it a small lick. Jessica grinned. It wasn't much, but it was progress. The days passed, and Max grew stronger. His stitches healed, his appetite returned, and soon he was able to take longer walks. The first time he trotted ahead of Jessica instead of lagging behind, she almost cried again. One afternoon, as they walked past the park, Max suddenly stopped, his ears twitching. Jessica followed his gaze and saw a small girl standing by a bench, holding a stuffed bunny. The toy was worn and patched in places, much like the little bear that had been inside Max. Jessica knelt beside him, rubbing his back. Thinking about your own little secret, huh? Max gave her a knowing look before turning back to watch the girl. Jessica smiled, running her fingers through his fur. You're a good boy, she whispered. The best. Max leaned against her, his tail wagging. He was home, safe, and back to being himself. And Jessica knew, no matter what, he always would be. Jessica sat on the porch with Max curled up at her feet. His breathing was steady, his eyes half closed in the golden light of late afternoon. She absent-mindedly ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the warmth beneath her hand. It had been 2 weeks since his surgery, and he was finally looking like himself again. His coat had its usual shine, and his ears twitched at every passing sound. Carol stepped outside, drying her hands on a dish towel. You two have been sitting there for a while? Everything okay? Jessica glanced up, then back at Max. Yeah, just thinking. He's getting stronger, but I can't stop wondering why he swallowed that bear. I mean, it was mine from when I was little. I hadn't seen it in years. Where did he even find it? Carol sat beside her on the porch swing. Dogs remember things in their own way. Maybe he found it somewhere and knew it was special to you. Jessica sighed. It just makes me wonder how long he's had it. And why now? Why swallow it after all this time? Max lifted his head slightly at the sound of her voice, his tail giving a single wag. Jessica smiled down at him. You've got your secrets, huh, buddy? A car rolled to a stop in front of their house, and Jessica looked up to see Noah stepping out. He had his usual easygoing expression, but there was something different in his eyes, like he had been thinking about something for a while. He carried a small paper bag as he made his way up the porch steps. "Brought more treats," he said, setting the bag on the small table. "Figured Max deserved a reward." Jessica grinned. "You're going to spoil him." "That's the plan," Noah said with a shrug. "How's he doing?" "So much better," Jessica said. "He's eating normally, getting his energy back. I think he's just about ready to return to his usual routine." Noah crouched down, rubbing Max behind the ears. "That's great. You gave us all a scare, big guy." Max let out a small huff and nudged Noah's hand as if to say he was ready to move past all that. Noah chuckled. "So, I was actually talking to my grandpa the other day about Max's surgery. He's had dogs his whole life, and he told me something interesting. He said sometimes when a dog swallows something like that, it can mean they're feeling anxious or trying to hold on to something." Jessica frowned. "Like stress?" Noah nodded. "Yeah. Maybe he picked up on something. I mean, you guys have had a lot of changes lately, right? You told me before about the move, your dad leaving. Could be that he held on to that bear because he knew it meant something to you." Jessica looked down at Max, her heart squeezing a little. "I guess I never thought about it like that." Carol stood up. "Dogs are more in tune with us than we realize. Maybe he was holding on to a piece of the past because he knew you were trying to let go of it." Jessica swallowed hard. She had spent the past year trying to adjust. New school, new town, a new way of life without her dad being around. She thought she had handled it well, but had Max been feeling it all along? Noah leaned against the porch railing. "I think he was looking out for you in his own way." Jessica ran a hand over Max's back. "That sounds like him." For a moment, there was quiet between them. The late summer air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut grass, and the faint sound of crickets hummed in the distance. Noah cleared his throat. "Hey, so there's a dog event at the park this weekend. Kind of a fundraiser thing. They'll have agility courses, games, treats, all that stuff. I was thinking, maybe Max would like to go. You know, get back to normal?" Jessica considered it. "You think he's ready?" Noah smirked. "Look at him. He's already trying to convince you." Max had lifted his head, his ears perked up at the mention of the word park. Jessica laughed. Okay. I guess we'll go." Noah grinned. "Great, I'll swing by Saturday morning." As he walked back to his car, Jessica felt a lightness she hadn't felt in a while. Maybe Max had been holding on to something for her, but now it was time to move forward. Saturday arrived, and Max was more than ready. His tail wagged non-stop as Jessica clipped on his leash. The park was already bustling when they arrived. Dogs of all breeds ran through obstacle courses, played in kiddie pools, and lounged in the grass while their owners chatted. Max hesitated at first, taking in the sights and sounds. Jessica knelt beside him. "You good?" Max licked her hand, and then, as if deciding for himself, he stepped forward. Noah met them near a table with a sign-up sheet for a small obstacle course. "Think Max is up for a little challenge?" Jessica hesitated, but Max was already eyeing the course with interest. "Let's give it a shot." The first hurdle was a simple ramp. Max stepped up slowly, then trotted down with ease. The next was a series of poles to weave through. A little clumsy at first, but he got the hang of it. Jessica felt herself relax more with every step he took. He was having fun. She was too. By the time they reached the last hurdle, a small jump, Max was practically glowing with energy. Jessica gave him an encouraging pat. "All right, buddy, let's do this." Max ran forward and cleared the jump without hesitation. Cheers erupted from the small crowd gathered nearby, and Jessica beamed with pride. Noah clapped from the sidelines. "That's what I'm talking about." Jessica knelt down as Max trotted back to her. "You did amazing," Max barked happily, wagging his tail so hard his whole body wiggled. For the first time in a long time, Jessica felt like everything was going to be okay. Max had been holding on to a piece of her past, but now they were both stepping into something new. Together, Max trotted ahead with newfound energy as Jessica walked beside him, the leash loose in her hand. The air was cool that morning, crisp with the changing season, and the sky stretched wide and blue above them. Ever since the event at the park, Max had been livelier than ever, and Jessica found herself feeling lighter too. It was as if something unspoken had finally settled between them, an understanding that they had both carried weight neither had realized was there. Carol watched from the porch as they returned from their walk. "You two look like you had a good time," Jessica smiled. "He's got his bounce back." Carol crouched down, scratching behind Max's ears. "And you seem happier too." Jessica shrugged, but she knew her mother was right. Something had shifted, though she wasn't sure she could put it into words. Max had always been more than just a pet. He had been her rock through every change, every difficult moment, and now it felt like they had crossed some invisible threshold together. That afternoon, as she sat on the floor beside Max, scrolling through her phone, she noticed a message from Noah. "Noah, you up for another adventure?" Jessica smirked. Jessica: "Depends. What kind of adventure?" Noah: "There's this hiking trail about an hour outside town. I think Max would love it. Fresh air, wide open space. You in?" Jessica glanced down at Max, who had perked up as if he somehow knew they were talking about him. His tail thumped against the floor, his eyes bright. Jessica: "We're in." The next morning, Jessica packed a small bag with water bottles, snacks, and an extra leash just in case. Max paced near the door, his excitement barely contained. Carol handed Jessica a couple of protein bars as she grabbed her keys. "Be safe, and take lots of pictures." Noah pulled up in his truck a few minutes later, the bed of it lined with blankets for Max to ride comfortably. "You ready?" Jessica nodded, helping Max into the truck before climbing in. "He's been ready since last night. I swear he knew we were going somewhere." Noah chuckled. Dogs have a sixth sense for fun. The drive was peaceful, the radio playing softly in the background as they made their way out of town and into the rolling countryside. When they arrived, the trail stretched ahead of them, winding through a thick forest. Max leapt from the truck with an eagerness Jessica hadn't seen in a long time. "Looks like he's already leading the way," Noah said, grabbing his backpack. Jessica clipped on Max's leash but kept it loose, letting him sniff and explore as they started up the trail. The trees stood tall around them, golden leaves drifting down with the breeze. The sound of birds filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. "I used to come here a lot when I was younger," Noah said, stepping over a fallen branch. "My dad used to take me before he got too busy with work. It's nice to be back." Jessica glanced at him. "You ever miss it? The way things used to be?" Noah was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, but I guess that's just part of growing up, right? Things change whether you want them to or not." Jessica nodded. "Yeah, I get that." Max suddenly tugged on the leash, his ears pricked forward. Jessica followed his gaze to a clearing just ahead. Sunlight spilled through the trees, casting a golden glow over a small stream that trickled through the rocks. "Wow," Jessica breathed. "This is beautiful." Noah grinned. "Told you it was worth the drive." Max pulled toward the water, eager to investigate. Jessica let him go, watching as he sniffed along the edge before stepping in, the cool water splashing around his paws. He turned back to Jessica with an excited bark, as if urging her to join him. She laughed. "You are not dragging me in there, Max." Noah sat on a nearby rock, watching the water flow. "You ever think about what you want to do after high school?" Jessica sighed, sitting beside him. "Sometimes. I guess I'm still figuring it out." "You?" Noah stretched his legs out. "I want to work with animals. Maybe become a vet or something in conservation. Something that actually matters." Jessica smiled. "That's really cool. I can see you doing that." Noah shrugged. "Well, I still have a long way to go. But being around animals just makes sense to me. They don't pretend to be something they're not. They just are." Jessica glanced at Max, who was happily splashing in the water. "Yeah, they really do." They stayed at the stream for a while, letting Max enjoy himself before heading back down the trail. The drive home was quieter, but in a comfortable way. Jessica leaned against the window, watching the scenery pass by. When they pulled up in front of her house, she turned to Noah. "Thanks for today. I think Max really needed it." Noah smiled. "Anytime." Jessica climbed out, helping Max down. He was tired, but happy, his tail still wagging as they made their way inside. Carol looked up from the kitchen table. "How was it?" Jessica smiled. "Perfect." Later that night, as Max curled up beside her bed, Jessica reached down to scratch his ears. "You really are the best adventure buddy. You know that?" Max let out a soft sigh, pressing closer to her. Jessica closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of him beside her. Whatever the future held, she knew one thing for sure. She and Max would face it together. The wind rustled through the trees as Jessica jogged along the familiar path at the park, Max trotting beside her with his tongue lolling out. The past few weeks had been good to them. Max had bounced back completely, his energy back to what it used to be, maybe even more. Every morning, he was the one waking Jessica up, his tail thumping against her bed, eager for their daily routine. Carol had commented on it just the other day. "It's like he knows you need it just as much as he does." And maybe he did. The early morning runs cleared Jessica's mind. The steady rhythm of Max's paws on the ground, the cool morning air filling her lungs. It was exactly what she needed to start her days right. As they slowed to a walk, Jessica pulled out her phone, checking a message from Noah. "Noah, you working today?" Jessica, "Nope, just finished our run." "Why?" Noah, "You feel like another road trip? There's a rescue shelter outside town that needs volunteers. Thought we could help out." Jessica glanced at Max, who was sniffing at a patch of grass, then back at her phone. "Jessica, we're in." Noah's truck pulled up in front of her house half an hour later. Max jumped into the back seat, already knowing the routine. Jessica climbed in, fastening her seatbelt. "So, what's the deal with this place?" "It's a smaller shelter," Noah explained as he pulled onto the highway. "Not a lot of funding, mostly run by volunteers. They've been struggling to keep up with the number of animals coming in. My grandpa knows the owner, and I figured we could help out." Jessica nodded. "Sounds good to me. What are we going to be doing?" "Cleaning, feeding, walking some of the dogs. maybe socializing with the ones that are nervous around people. It's nothing glamorous, but it makes a difference. Max let out a low bark from the back, as if giving his approval. When they arrived, Jessica saw right away what Noah meant. The shelter was small, a single long building with a fenced-in yard. A woman in her 60s stood near the entrance, waving as they pulled up. She had short silver hair and a warm smile. "Noah, it's been a while," she said, giving him a quick hug before turning to Jessica. "And you must be Jessica. I'm Martha. Thank you both for coming." Jessica shook her hand. "Happy to help." Martha glanced at Max, her smile widening. "And who's this handsome boy?" "This is Max," Jessica said, patting his side. "He loves making new friends." "Then he's come to the right place," Martha said. "Come on in, I'll show you around." Inside, the shelter was simple but clean. Rows of kennels lined the walls, each one occupied by a different dog. Some wagged their tails eagerly at the sight of visitors, while others hung back, eyes wary. "Most of them are strays or surrenders," Martha explained as they walked. "A few were abandoned, left tied up outside. Some come from bad situations, so they need time to trust again." Jessica felt a pang in her chest as she looked into the eyes of a small, trembling dog curled up in the corner of a kennel. "That's heartbreaking." Martha nodded. "But we do what we can. And today, you're part of that." She led them to the back, where a fenced-in area allowed some of the dogs to stretch their legs. "Noah, why don't you take some of the bigger dogs for a walk? Jessica, I could use your help with the smaller ones." Jessica nodded, stepping into the yard. Max followed her, his tail wagging as he sniffed around. One of the smaller dogs, a tan terrier mix, cautiously approached him. Max stood still, letting the smaller dog sniff him before giving a friendly wag. Jessica crouched down, extending her hand. The terrier hesitated, then inched closer, finally pressing his nose against her fingers. "Hey there," she said softly. "You're safe." Martha watched with an approving nod. "You've got a gentle way about you. That's exactly what some of these dogs need." They spent the next few hours feeding, cleaning, and walking the dogs. Jessica found herself drawn to the terrier, who followed her around, his small body gradually losing its stiffness. "I think you've got a new fan," Noah teased when he returned, wiping sweat from his brow. Jessica laughed, glancing down at the terrier. "He's kind of growing on me." Martha leaned against the fence. "He's been here the longest. People tend to overlook the quiet ones, but he just needs the right person." Jessica felt a tug in her chest. "What's his name?" "Charlie. Charlie." She looked at him again, at the way his ears twitched when she spoke. He was small, but there was something about him that reminded her of Max. Something in the way he was cautious, but hopeful at the same time. She reached down, scratching behind his ears. "I think Max approves." Max, who had been lying nearby, opened one eye, then gave a lazy wag of his tail. Noah crossed his arms. "Thinking about taking him home?" Jessica hesitated. "I mean, I wasn't, but now," Martha smiled. "No pressure, but if you do, I think it'd be the best thing that ever happened to him." Jessica looked at Charlie again, then at Max. Maybe their little family was about to grow, and for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't scare her at all. Jessica lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady breathing of Max at the foot of her bed. Her thoughts kept circling back to the little terrier at the shelter, the way he had inched closer, the cautious but hopeful glint in his eyes. Charlie. It was such a simple name, yet it already felt familiar. She had gone to the shelter thinking she'd just be lending a hand, doing something good for the dogs who needed help. She hadn't expected to feel this pull toward one in particular. Max had been her only dog for years, her constant companion, and she had never really thought about adding another. But something about Charlie made her hesitate before pushing the idea away. She shifted onto her side, looking toward Max. "What do you think, buddy?" she murmured. "Would you be okay with another dog in the house?" Max's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but he didn't stir. His steady breathing filled the quiet room, and Jessica let out a sigh. The next morning, as she poured herself a cup of coffee, Carol gave her a knowing look. "You've been thinking about it, haven't you?" Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Thinking about what?" Carol sipped her tea. "That little dog at the shelter. Charlie." Jessica sighed. "Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't planning on adopting another dog, but he just seems like he needs someone." Carol smiled. "Max was once in need, too. And look at how that turned out." Jessica glanced at Max, who was lazily stretching on the floor, clearly enjoying the peaceful morning. "It's a big decision," Carol continued. "But if you're thinking about it this much, it might be worth listening to that feeling." Jessica nodded slowly. "I think I need to go back and see him again, just to be sure." Carol grinned. "Then I think you already know your answer." A few hours later, Jessica found herself pulling into the shelter parking lot, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Noah was already there, leaning against his truck, a smirk on his face. "Knew you'd be back," he said, as she stepped out. Jessica rolled her eyes. "I haven't made any decisions yet." "Sure," Noah said, leading the way inside. "Just here to visit, right?" Martha greeted them with a warm smile. "Back so soon?" Jessica nodded. "I wanted to see Charlie again." Martha led them to the fenced-in yard where Charlie was sitting near the back, watching the other dogs with quiet curiosity. When he spotted Jessica, his ears perked up, and he hesitated before taking a few cautious steps forward. Jessica knelt down, holding out her hand. "Hey, Charlie. Remember me?" Charlie sniffed the air, then moved a little closer. This time there was less hesitation, and after a few moments he pressed his small head against her palm. Noah crossed his arms. "Looks like someone made up his mind for you." Jessica laughed softly. "Yeah, it kind of feels that way." Martha leaned against the fence. "Charlie's been waiting a long time for someone to give him a chance. If that someone is you, I can promise you won't regret it." Jessica looked at Charlie, at the way he was now sitting beside her, his small tail wagging slightly. She thought about Max, about how much he had changed her life. Maybe Charlie wasn't just a dog who needed a home. Maybe he was meant to be here, with them. She took a deep breath. "All right, let's do this," Martha beamed. "Wonderful. Let's get the paperwork started." As they filled out the forms, Jessica felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She knew bringing another dog into her life would be an adjustment, but looking down at Charlie, she felt something settle inside her. Once everything was finalized, Martha handed her a leash. "Congratulations, Jessica. He's yours." Charlie looked up at her, his tail wagging a little harder now. She knelt beside him, giving him a gentle scratch behind the ears. "Welcome home, Charlie." Max was waiting at the door when they arrived, his ears perked up at the sight of the new arrival. Jessica knelt down beside him. "All right, buddy. Be nice, okay? He's a little nervous." Charlie hesitated on the threshold, but Max took a step forward, giving him a sniff before giving a small huff and trotting back inside. Jessica let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Well, that went better than expected. Over the next few days, Charlie slowly began to settle in. At first, he stuck close to Jessica, following her around the house like a shadow. But Max, being the patient dog he was, gave Charlie space to adjust. He shared his toys, let Charlie sniff around without interference, and even allowed him to curl up nearby at night. Jessica watched the way they interacted, the quiet understanding forming between them. It wasn't long before Charlie started joining Max on their morning runs, his little legs working twice as hard to keep up. He wasn't as fast or as strong, but he was determined, and Max seemed to accept him as part of their routine. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Noah pulled up in his truck, stepping out with a grin. "How's the new family member settling in?" Jessica looked down at Charlie, who was lying beside Max, his small body relaxed, his eyes half closed in contentment. "Better than I could have hoped." Noah sat beside her, watching the two dogs. "Told you. Sometimes the best things happen when you aren't even looking for them." Jessica smiled. "Yeah, I think you might be right." As the sun dipped below the horizon, she reached down, running her fingers through Max's fur, then Charlie's. Her little family had grown in a way she hadn't expected, but she wouldn't change a thing. Because sometimes, the ones who needed rescuing weren't just the dogs. They were the people who needed them too. Jessica woke up to the sound of soft paw steps against the hardwood floor. She opened one eye to see Max stretching near the door, his tail wagging lazily. Beside him, Charlie stood alert, watching her closely. He was still getting used to their routine, but he had already learned that mornings meant one thing: adventure. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "All right, I'm up." Charlie let out a small yip, spinning in a quick circle before trotting toward the front door. Jessica chuckled as she got out of bed and pulled on a hoodie. "You're catching on quick, little guy." Max gave Charlie a quick nudge before leading the way outside. The cool morning air filled Jessica's lungs as she stepped onto the porch. The sky was still tinged with the soft hues of dawn, and the world felt quiet in that peaceful way it always did before the day truly began. Their morning run started slow, giving Charlie time to warm up. He was smaller than Max, but what he lacked in size, he made up for in determination. His little legs moved quickly, keeping pace as they rounded the familiar paths of the park. Max, always patient, adjusted his speed to match his new companion. By the time they returned home, Charlie was panting, but his tail hadn't stopped wagging. Jessica knelt beside him, scratching under his chin. "You did good, bud." Carol was waiting in the kitchen, a mug of coffee in hand, watching as Jessica filled the dog's water bowls. "Looks like they're already thick as thieves." Jessica smiled. "Max is showing him the ropes." Carol took a sip of her coffee. "You're really settling into this, aren't you? Having two dogs?" Jessica nodded. "Yeah, it feels right. Like Charlie was always supposed to be here." Carol gave her a knowing look but said nothing, just took another sip of coffee. Later that afternoon, Jessica was sitting on the porch with Max and Charlie when Noah's truck pulled up. He hopped out, holding a folded flyer in his hand. "So, there's something happening this weekend that you might be interested in." Jessica raised an eyebrow as she took the flyer. "What is it?" "Dog training event," Noah said. "They've got obedience courses, agility trials, even some basic rescue training for dogs who might have a knack for it. Figured it could be a fun way to get Charlie more comfortable with new experiences." Jessica looked down at Charlie, who was sprawled out beside Max, enjoying the sun. "I don't know if he's ready for all that." "It's low pressure," Noah assured her. "Mostly for fun. And besides, Max might enjoy it too." Jessica thought about it. Charlie had come a long way since she brought him home, but he was still hesitant in new environments. Maybe this could be a good way to build his confidence. "All right," she said. "We'll go." Saturday arrived quickly, and Jessica loaded the dogs into the car, Charlie sitting comfortably beside Max in the back seat. As they pulled into the event space, she could already see the setup, fenced-off areas for different training exercises, groups of people gathered with their dogs, laughter and excited barks filling the air. Charlie hesitated as she opened the car door. Max jumped out first, sniffing the air, while Charlie peered cautiously at the unfamiliar surroundings. Jessica crouched down beside him. "You're okay, buddy. We're just here to have some fun." Noah appeared beside them. "Hey, you made it." Jessica stood up. "Yeah, let's see what these two can do." Max took to the activities naturally. He trotted through the obstacle course with ease, weaving through poles and hopping over hurdles with enthusiasm. Charlie, on the other hand, was hesitant at first. He approached each new task cautiously, glancing at Jessica for reassurance before stepping forward. "He's thinking about everything before he does it," Noah observed. "That's actually a good sign." Jessica nodded. "Yeah, he's smart. Just needs a little confidence." They spent the afternoon rotating between different activities. Charlie struggled with some, but excelled at others. When they reached the recall exercise, where dogs had to come when called from a distance, Jessica wasn't sure how he'd do. She stood on one end of the marked field, Charlie at the other. The trainer gave a nod. "Whenever you're ready." Jessica took a deep breath. "Charlie, come!" For a second, Charlie hesitated. His ears perked, his eyes locked on hers. Then slowly at first, he started toward her. His steps grew more confident with each one, until he was running, his tail wagging as he reached her. She crouched down, wrapping her arms around him. "That's my boy," Noah clapped from the sidelines. "See? He just needed a little encouragement." Jessica grinned. "I think he's starting to believe in himself." By the time they left, both dogs were exhausted but happy. Jessica felt something shift in her chest as she watched Charlie curled up in the back seat beside Max, his small body finally at ease. He wasn't just a stray anymore. He was home. As they pulled into her driveway, Noah leaned against the passenger seat. "You ever think about training Max for something bigger?" Jessica frowned. "Like what? Search and rescue, maybe? He's got the temperament for it, and I bet Charlie would pick up on it too." Jessica glanced at Max, who was watching her in the rearview mirror, always alert, always ready. She had never thought about it before, but now the idea planted itself in her mind. "Maybe," she said slowly. "It's something to think about." Noah grinned. "Well, when you're ready, let me know. I know some people who could help." Jessica nodded as she opened the door, letting the dogs out. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. Max and Charlie would be right there with her, every step of the way. Over the next few weeks, Jessica found herself growing more curious about the idea Noah had mentioned: search and rescue training. It wasn't something she had ever considered before, but the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Max was already so well-behaved, so tuned in to her every command. And Charlie, despite his timid nature, was sharp and eager to learn. Maybe it was worth exploring. She brought it up one evening while Noah was helping her repair a broken gate latch in the backyard. The dogs were lying nearby, Max chewing on a tennis ball, while Charlie gnawed at a plush toy that was quickly losing its stuffing. "So, about that search and rescue thing," she said, handing Noah a screwdriver. "What exactly would it involve?" Noah glanced at her, then back at the gate. "Well, it starts with basic obedience, which Max already has down. Then you work on scent training. teaching them to follow specific scents, alert when they find something, that kind of thing. Eventually, if they're good at it, you can move on to more advanced stuff, like tracking missing people or finding objects in challenging environments. Jessica nodded slowly. It sounds intense. It can be, Noah admitted, but it's also really rewarding. Dogs love having a job to do, and for the right dog, it can be a lot of fun. Plus, it makes a real difference. You never know when someone might need help. She looked over at Max, who was now watching her intently, as if he knew they were talking about him. How do I even start? Is there a class or something? Noah tightened the latch and stood up. Yeah, there are local groups that offer introductory sessions. They'll assess your dog's potential and get you started with the basics. I can give you a couple of contacts if you want. Jessica thought about it for a moment before nodding. Yeah, I think I'd like that. The following weekend, Jessica and Noah took the dogs to a nearby field where a small training group was holding an introductory session. The instructor, a middle-aged man named Tom, had years of experience training search and rescue dogs. He welcomed them with a firm handshake and a friendly smile. We'll start with some simple scent exercises, Tom explained. This isn't about perfection. It's about seeing how your dogs react, how they engage with the process. Max was up first. Tom had Jessica hold Max's leash while another trainer hid a small, scented item, an old glove, behind a tree. Then he gave Jessica a few pointers on how to guide Max. When he catches the scent, you'll see it. His posture will change, his nose will go to work. Just let him lead. Jessica nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. All right, Max, let's find it. Max's ears perked up at her command. His nose dipped to the ground, and he started moving with purpose, weaving back and forth. Jessica followed, keeping the leash loose, letting him guide her. It didn't take long. Within minutes, Max stopped and pawed at the ground near the tree. When Jessica stepped closer, she saw the glove tucked into a hollow. She knelt down and gave Max a big hug. You're amazing. Tom smiled. Great job. He's got a good nose and he's confident. That's exactly what you want to see. Next, it was Charlie's turn. Jessica wasn't sure how he'd handle it, but she was willing to try. The same glove was hidden in a new spot, and Jessica crouched down to Charlie's level. Okay, Charlie, your turn. Let's find it. Charlie hesitated at first, glancing back at Jessica. She gave him an encouraging pat. You can do it. Slowly, Charlie sniffed the ground, taking tentative steps. His movements were more cautious than Max's, but he was trying. He followed the trail, stopping occasionally to look at Jessica for reassurance. When he finally reached the glove, his tail started wagging furiously. He barked once, then twice, as if to say, I found it! Jessica knelt down, laughing. Yes, you did. Good boy, Charlie. Tom nodded approvingly. He's a little tentative, but he's got potential. With some practice, I think he could do really well. Jessica left the session feeling more excited than she'd expected. Both dogs had shown promise, and she was starting to see how rewarding this work could be. Over the next few weeks, she attended more sessions, learning how to refine the dogs' skills and build their confidence. Max took to the training like a natural, while Charlie continued to surprise her with his determination. Noah came along whenever he could, helping out and offering encouragement. One day, after a particularly good training session, he handed her a water bottle and said, You know, you're really good at this. The way you connect with them, how you read their body language, it's not something everyone can do. Jessica blushed, taking a sip. I'm just doing my best. Well, your best is pretty impressive, he said with a grin. By the time autumn rolled around, Jessica and her dogs had become a regular part of the training group. They'd moved on from simple scent games to more complex exercises, like tracking a scent trail through a wooded area. Max continued to excel, and Charlie, while still a bit cautious, had come out of his shell in ways Jessica never expected. One crisp afternoon, after a training session in the forest, Jessica sat on a log, watching Max and Charlie play in the leaves. Tom approached, hands in his pockets. "You know, if you ever want to take this further, there are advanced courses that lead to certification. I think Max is ready. Charlie, too, with a bit more time." Jessica looked up at him, surprised. "Really? You think we're ready for that?" "I do," Tom said. "You've put in the work, and it shows. If you're interested, I can help you get started." Jessica glanced at her dogs. Max was rolling around in the leaves, his tail wagging furiously, while Charlie barked playfully and bounced around him. They looked so happy, so full of life. The thought of taking their skills to the next level, of doing something truly meaningful with them, sent a spark of excitement through her. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think we're ready." Tom smiled. "Great. Let's make it happen." Jessica and the dogs threw themselves into their training with new focus. Every week, they worked on increasingly complex drills, finding objects hidden under piles of leaves, following scent trails over rocky terrain, and responding to specific commands even in noisy environments. Max continued to excel, his instincts sharp, and his confidence unwavering. Charlie, though still shy in new situations, showed a growing eagerness to try, and his cautious determination made each small victory all the more rewarding. The team became a familiar sight at the training grounds. Tom often remarked on the bond between Jessica and her dogs, saying it was clear they trusted her completely. And it wasn't just trust. There was a rhythm to their work, a seamless connection that allowed them to anticipate each other's next move. Noah was there too, always lending a hand or helping to set up courses. He'd become something of a regular at the sessions, and his encouragement meant a lot to Jessica. She noticed how well he got along with both Max and Charlie, often sneaking them treats when he thought she wasn't looking. One day after training, as they were packing up, Tom approached Jessica with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "there's a team evaluation coming up next month. It's a chance to test your skills in a simulated environment, see how the dogs handle a real search scenario." Jessica blinked, taken aback. "A team evaluation? Already?" Tom nodded. "I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't think you were ready. Max is solid, and Charlie's made incredible progress. It's not a competition. It's just a way to gauge where you are, what you might need to work on. And if you do well, it's one step closer to certification." She hesitated. "Do you really think we can do it?" "I do," Tom said firmly, "and I'll be there to guide you through it." Jessica looked at her dogs, who were lying in the grass, tired but content. "All right," she said finally. "We'll give it a shot." The weeks leading up to the evaluation were intense. Jessica worked with Max and Charlie every chance she got, running drills in different locations, adding distractions, and practicing commands until they became second nature. Max continued to thrive, tackling each challenge with enthusiasm, while Charlie slowly gained more confidence. Each time he successfully found a hidden object or completed a trail, Jessica celebrated his progress, knowing that every small step was a victory. Noah pitched in too, acting as the missing person in their practice sessions, hiding in the woods and calling out encouragement when the dogs found him. "You've got this, Charlie!" he'd yell, as the little terrier trotted up, tail wagging furiously. And Jessica noticed that each time Charlie succeeded, his tail wagged a little harder, his steps grew a little more sure. As the evaluation day approached, Jessica couldn't help feeling nervous. This was the first time they'd be tested in a controlled environment, with other trainers and teams watching. But she reminded herself that it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about seeing how far they'd come. When the day finally arrived, Jessica felt her stomach twist as she pulled into the training grounds. The field was bustling with activity, teams setting up equipment, dogs barking and wagging tails, handlers checking their gear. She took a deep breath and looked at Max and Charlie. "All right, guys, let's do this." The evaluation began with basic drills. Max sailed through them, his focus unshakable. He followed scent trails with precision, alerted perfectly when he found hidden objects, and responded to every command with enthusiasm. Jessica felt a surge of pride as she watched him work, his joy evident in every wag of his tail. Then it was Charlie's turn. Jessica knelt beside him, giving him a reassuring pat. "You're ready," she whispered. "Just do your best." Charlie hesitated at first, his gaze flicking to the trainers and other teams nearby. But then Jessica gave the command, and he started moving. His steps were cautious, but he followed the scent trail, his nose working steadily. When he reached the hidden object, a small pouch tucked under a bush, he paused, then barked twice, tail wagging tentatively. Jessica rushed to him, her voice full of encouragement. "Good boy, Charlie. You did it." Tom, who was watching from the sidelines, nodded approvingly. He's come a long way. By the end of the evaluation, Jessica felt a mix of relief and pride. Max had performed brilliantly, as expected, but it was Charlie's progress that truly warmed her heart. He'd faced his nerves and shown just how far he'd come, proving that even a small, timid dog could rise to the challenge. As they packed up to leave, Noah walked over, grinning. "You did great," he said. "Both of them. You should be proud." Jessica smiled. "I am. They've worked so hard." Tom approached, holding a clipboard. "You'll get the official results in a week, but I can tell you right now, you're on the right track. Keep it up." Driving home, Jessica glanced in the rearview mirror at her dogs, both curled up and dozing after a long day. She felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't expected. They'd taken on a challenge together, pushed themselves, and come out stronger on the other side. The following week, when the results came in, Jessica was thrilled to see that they had passed the evaluation. It wasn't perfect. There were areas to improve, particularly for Charlie, but it was enough to move forward. The certification process was still ahead, but this milestone felt like a huge step. Jessica celebrated by taking Max and Charlie to their favorite park, letting them run free in the open field. As she watched them play, she thought about how much her life had changed since Charlie came home. It wasn't just about the training or the certification. It was about the bond they had formed, the way they had grown together. Max had always been her rock, her steady companion, and now Charlie had become part of that foundation too. Noah joined them, bringing along a few new toys he'd picked up. "Congratulations, team leader," he said, handing her a tug rope. "You deserve it." Jessica laughed. "Thanks, but it's really these two who did all the hard work." "Well, you had a little something to do with it," Noah said. "They couldn't have done it without you." As the sun set over the park, casting a warm glow over the field, Jessica felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. For Max, who had always been her anchor. For Charlie, who had taught her the value of patience and persistence. And for Noah, who had been there every step of the way. They still had a long journey ahead, but Jessica knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't trade this for anything. Together, they were a team, and the best was yet to come. Jessica was up before the sun, slipping on her boots as Max and Charlie waited by the door. Today was another training day, and she could feel the excitement buzzing through her. The team evaluation had been a milestone, but now, as they moved closer to official certification, each session felt more purposeful. Max and Charlie had become a well-practiced pair, each with their strengths. Max was the confident leader, unflinching in the face of any challenge. Charlie was the cautious thinker, methodical and steady, always ready to step up once he'd sized up the situation. Together, they balanced each other in ways Jessica hadn't imagined when she started this journey. The field was quiet when she arrived. A few other handlers were already there, setting up scent trails and discussing strategies. Jessica greeted them as she led Max and Charlie to their usual spot, where Tom was waiting with his clipboard and a warm smile. "Morning, Jessica," he said, checking off a box on his list. "Ready to get started?" "Definitely," she replied. "What's on the agenda today?" "We'll be working on split trails. It's a more advanced technique where two scent trails cross each other. It's a good test of focus and persistence." Jessica nodded, her nerves tingling with anticipation. This was the kind of challenge she had been waiting for, a chance to see how far they'd come. She glanced down at Max, who was already alert, his ears perked. Charlie stood close by, his tail wagging slowly as he looked up at her, waiting for direction. They started with Max. Tom had another trainer lay down two intersecting trails, each leading to a different hidden object. Jessica gave Max the signal, and he took off, his nose to the ground, his movements confident and deliberate. When he reached the point where the trails crossed, he paused for a moment, his nose working furiously to sort through the overlapping scents. Then, with a decisive move, he chose one trail and followed it to its end, where he found the hidden object and barked once, his tail wagging as he sat beside it. "Good boy, Max," Jessica called, jogging over to praise him. Tom nodded in approval. "He handled that beautifully," he said. "No hesitation, just solid focus." Next, it was Charlie's turn. Jessica knelt beside him, stroking his fur. "You can do this," she murmured. "Just take your time." Charlie started off slowly, his nose low to the ground. He approached the intersection cautiously, his movements careful and deliberate. When he reached the crossing point, he stopped and looked back at Jessica as if seeking reassurance. She gave him an encouraging nod. "You're okay, Charlie. You've got this." He sniffed the ground again, his tail wagging slightly, and then chose a trail. It wasn't the direct, confident stride of Max, but it was steady, and when he reached the end and found the hidden object, he barked softly, his tail wagging more enthusiastically now. Jessica knelt beside him, her voice full of praise. "Good job, Charlie. That's my boy." Tom made a note on his clipboard. "He's still a little hesitant, but he's thinking it through. That's a good sign. With more practice, he'll get faster." By the end of the session, Jessica felt a sense of accomplishment. Both Max and Charlie had handled the challenge well, each in their own way. She could see how far they'd come since that first day at the training field, when she wasn't even sure if Charlie would follow a basic scent trail. Now, they were tackling advanced techniques, and though there was still work to be done, she couldn't be prouder of her team. Noah arrived as they were packing up, carrying a thermos of coffee and a bag of dog treats. "How'd it go?" he asked, handing her the thermos. "Great," Jessica said, taking a sip. "They both did really well. I think they're ready for more advanced training." Noah smiled. "I'm not surprised. They've got the best handler in the group." Jessica laughed. "I don't know about that, but I'll take the compliment." As they walked back to the car, Jessica thought about what lay ahead. Certification was still a few months away, but each session brought them closer. The journey had been challenging, but also deeply rewarding. She had learned so much, not just about training and scent work, but about patience, persistence, and the incredible bond that could form between a handler and her dogs. When they arrived home, Max and Charlie flopped onto their favorite spots in the living room, clearly tired but content. Jessica sat on the floor beside them, running her hands through their fur. "You guys are amazing," she said softly. "I couldn't do this without you." Max let out a happy huff, and Charlie gave her a quick lick on the hand. Jessica smiled. This was just the beginning, and she couldn't wait to see what the future held for her and her team. Jessica and her dogs had settled into a comfortable routine. Their days revolved around training sessions, long walks, and moments of quiet bonding at home. Max remained his usual confident self, always eager to tackle a new challenge, while Charlie continued to surprise her with his growing confidence. Each small victory, each successful scent trail or obedience drill felt like a step toward something bigger. One morning, as they headed out to the training field, Jessica noticed that the weather had taken a turn. The sky was overcast, and the air was heavy with the scent of rain. Tom was already there, his jacket zipped up to his chin as he prepared the equipment. "Looks like we might get wet today," he called out, giving Max and Charlie a quick pat on the head. "Wouldn't be the first time," Jessica replied with a smile, adjusting the straps on her gear. Tom nodded. "We'll keep it simple today. Focus on consistency. No need to push too hard in this weather." The session started smoothly. Max breezed through his drills, his tail wagging as he completed each task with ease. Jessica watched him with pride, marveling at how far he'd come. Then it was Charlie's turn. She gave him a reassuring pat and the command to start. Charlie sniffed the ground, following the scent trail with slow, deliberate steps. When he reached the end and found the hidden object, he barked once, his tail wagging furiously. "Good boy," Jessica said, crouching down to praise him. Charlie leaned into her touch, his eyes bright with excitement. Tom nodded approvingly from the sidelines. "He's really building confidence. You're doing a great job with him." The rain started to fall as they packed up for the day, light at first, then steadily growing heavier. Jessica quickly loaded Max and Charlie into the car and waved to Tom before heading home. By the time they pulled into the driveway, the rain was coming down in sheets. Jessica hurried the dogs inside, toweling them off before letting them settle in their favorite spots. Max flopped onto his bed with a satisfied sigh, while Charlie curled up next to him, his small body tucked into a tight ball. Jessica sat on the couch, watching the rain streak down the windows. She thought about the progress they had made, about the upcoming certification tests, and about what might come after that. There was still so much to learn, so many challenges to face. But she felt ready. More than that, she felt supported. Her dogs weren't just her trainees. They were her partners, her companions, and her greatest motivation. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of training sessions and preparation. Jessica worked tirelessly with Max and Charlie, refining their skills and building their confidence. She learned to read their body language, to anticipate their needs, and to guide them through each challenge with patience and consistency. And in return, they gave her their absolute trust and loyalty. Noah continued to help out whenever he could, acting as a missing person for the dogs to find, offering encouragement, and always bringing an extra bag of treats. Jessica appreciated his steady presence, his easygoing nature, and the way he never doubted her or her dogs. One evening, after a particularly successful training session, Jessica sat outside on the porch, watching the sunset with Max and Charlie at her side. Noah joined them, sitting on the steps with a bottle of water in hand. "You know," he said, "it's pretty amazing to see how far you've come. When you started all this, did you ever think you'd get to this point?" Jessica shook her head. "No. I just wanted to give Max something to do and help Charlie feel more confident. I never imagined we'd be preparing for certification or even thinking about joining a real search and rescue team." Noah smiled. "Well, you've done more than that. You've built a team that works together, that trusts each other. That's no small thing." Jessica looked down at Max and Charlie. Max was resting his head on her knee, his eyes half closed, while Charlie leaned against her other leg, his tail wagging gently. She felt a swell of pride and gratitude. "They're incredible. I don't know what I'd do without them." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Jessica felt a sense of calm settle over her. There was still a long road ahead, but she knew she was on the right path. With Max and Charlie by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. The long-awaited certification day dawned crisp and cool, with the sun just beginning to peek over the horizon. Jessica stood by her car, double-checking her gear, while Max and Charlie waited patiently by her side. Both dogs were alert and ready, their tails wagging softly as they watched her every move. She felt a mixture of nerves and excitement coursing through her. Months of hard work had led to this moment, and she knew her dogs were as prepared as they could possibly be. They arrived at the training grounds early, joining a handful of other handlers and their dogs. Tom greeted them with his usual warm smile, clipboard in hand. "Good to see you, Jessica. How are Max and Charlie feeling today?" "They're ready," Jessica said, glancing down at them. Max sat confidently by her feet, his ears perked, while Charlie stood close, his tail wagging gently as if to say, "We've got this." Tom nodded. "You've done great work with them. Remember, this is just another step. You know what to do." Jessica gave a small smile, feeling a bit more reassured. "Thanks, Tom." The certification test was divided into several stages, each designed to assess different skills. The first was a straightforward scent trail, with an item hidden in a grassy field. Max went first. As soon as Jessica gave the command, he set off, his nose to the ground, moving with confidence and precision. Within minutes, he found the object and barked once, sitting proudly beside it. Jessica praised him, feeling a wave of pride. Then it was Charlie's turn. Jessica knelt beside him, giving him a reassuring pat. "You've got this, buddy. Just take your time." Charlie sniffed the air, his tail wagging slowly. He started off cautiously, his steps deliberate. When he reached the crossing point in the trail, he paused, his nose working furiously. Jessica watched, holding her breath. Then, after a few moments, Charlie made his decision and followed the correct trail. When he found the hidden item, he barked twice, his tail wagging more enthusiastically now. "Good boy," Jessica said, crouching down to hug him. Charlie leaned into her touch, his eyes bright with excitement. Tom, watching from the sidelines, gave a thumbs up. "He's come so far. Well done." The next stage was an obedience test. Max performed flawlessly, responding to every command with quick, confident movements. Charlie hesitated a couple of times, glancing back at Jessica for reassurance, but each time, he followed through. By the end of the stage, both dogs had passed, and Jessica felt a sense of relief. They were doing it. They were proving how far they had come. The final test was a simulated search scenario. A missing person was hidden in a wooded area, and the dogs had to locate them and alert Jessica. Max led the way, moving through the underbrush with purpose. He stopped several times, his ears swiveling, his nose working, until finally he let out a series of sharp barks. Jessica hurried over, finding the missing person sitting behind a tree. Max sat beside them, his tail wagging, looking up at Jessica as if to say, "I did it." "Great job, Max," Jessica said, giving him a quick scratch behind the ears. Then it was Charlie's turn. Jessica knelt down, meeting his eyes. "Okay, Charlie. This is it. Let's find them." Charlie sniffed the ground, moving forward with careful steps. He paused often, his nose lifting to catch the scent in the air. Jessica stayed close, her voice calm and encouraging. After several minutes, Charlie stopped abruptly, his tail wagging furiously. He let out a bark, then another, and looked back at Jessica. She followed his lead, and there, tucked behind a thick cluster of bushes, was the missing person. Jessica felt a surge of pride. "Good boy, Charlie. You did it." Tom clapped from a distance, his expression one of genuine approval. "You've got a strong team here, Jessica. They've both earned it." By the time they finished, Jessica was exhausted but elated. She hugged both Max and Charlie, feeling a swell of gratitude for her two incredible dogs. They had worked so hard, faced so many challenges, and now they had proven just how capable they were. That evening, as they sat on the porch at home, Jessica watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Max rested his head on her lap, while Charlie curled up at her feet. She ran her hands through their fur, feeling the warmth and steady rhythm of their breathing. "Not a bad day, huh?" she said softly. Max let out a contented sigh, and Charlie wagged his tail in agreement. In that moment, Jessica felt a deep sense of peace. They had accomplished something meaningful, not just in earning their certification, but in the bond they had built along the way. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more opportunities to grow and learn, but for now, she was content. With Max and Charlie by her side, she felt ready for anything.